All right, so now we're on to getting through the goals. Like how, because I mean, that's broad, right? Like I think a lot of them, their goal is just let's get the degree. But that's an example of a big goal. But how do we get to those big goals?
Yeah, so you can have outcome goals. We've talked about it in our sessions before. Like we have outcome goals and then we have behavioral goals. I always push people towards the behaviors because you can have this outcome goal. It's great. I love it.
Yep.
But what behaviors are going to get you there?
Yeah.
So if your long-term goal, of course, is going to be get your degree, get a job, graduate, that's great. That's the outcome. But how can we now break it down into manageable steps to help you achieve that?
Yeah. And so let's talk about what a good smaller goal looks like.
Yes. So we've talked about visioning. We've talked about having that, vision statement of where you want to be with your wellness. I always like to say, okay, let's look at 3 months from now, right? Let's look at where do you want to be 3 months from now? What is in 3 months? Semesters are about
That's
3
3
months.
I was like, you nailed the timeline.
So that's perfect. You say, what is a specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely goal that you can achieve by the end of the semester?
Yeah.
But that's great. That can be overwhelming for some people.
Yeah.
So why don't you take it even smaller and say, okay, here's where I want to be at the end of the semester. How can I get there in the next 1 or 2 weeks? What are my first steps needed?
Yeah.
And then hold yourself accountable. Have your professor help with accountability.
Yep.
Especially if you're writing goals and turning them in.
Yep.
Like this is a way for you to check in and see how people are doing. I know that's asking a lot. But if there's specific students who maybe want that support, or ask another student, right?
Yeah.
Like having accountability and support is huge when you're trying to meet goals and make them happen.
So even looking at making smaller goals, I know a lot of times I tell students to make goals for their study sessions. And one of the things that I'm hoping that they recognize is like if they're small and measurable, then they know when they've achieved it. So if you just say your study session is, I'm going to review how the heart works.
Yep.
How do you know when you're done with that? Like you can have an entire career just studying the heart. That's hard to celebrate that success. So if you're like, oh, I'm going to keep going until I get an 80% on the practice questions.
Yes.
Then you know when you hit that.
Correct.
And you can have these small dopamine bursts of like, oh,
I did it.
I did it.
Yes.
And then that helps with that motivation piece.
You
So
can celebrate that.
goal setting, not only changing the behaviors to get to the final end goal, it's huge for that motivation piece because then, we have little celebrations in between.
Correct.
We're not just waiting for the grade on the exam.
Correct. When you don't have a behavior that you're working towards or an achievable, measurable result, for instance, I always go back to the wellness world because that's my cup of tea. But like people say, I want to run during the week.
Yeah.
Well, great. What if you went for one run? Did you meet your goal?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's very like, I want to run 3 times. So like you said, I want to be able to get an 80% in the practice exam. I want to be able to list this many
Structures or something.
structures, whatever you're studying, right? Be specific with it, right?
Yeah.
And give yourself that behavior to work towards.
Yeah.
And how are you going to get there? How are you going to study? What does your study look like?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I learned from you too. It's like it's always about the behaviors and the changes of behaviors. Because if you don't change the behavior, you're going to end up with the same outcome.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so then you already kind of started talking about accountability. That'll be our next video.
Awesome.